All right, there we go. All right, well, everyone, thank you again. Zoomers, let me know, are you getting the weird echo or anything? Okay. So, maybe we should start with any feedback from last week. Does anyone have anything they want to share about hearing H.D. Goswami lecture? Yeah, go ahead, Chad.
I wanted to ask him, but I didn't want to prolong the conversation, and it's because I'm in the field of like mental health.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know what the thought is around like people that struggle with different mental health conditions that are very debilitating towards, to their mind and their soul and their body. So
Yeah.
just a comment on, I don't know, what
And these
his
teachings.
I don't know what his thoughts are, and these
Okay.
teachings and how that applies. Just because I think about it a lot, because that's what I spend a lot of my time doing.
Yeah.
So,
Having read a little bit, what comes to mind for you?
well, I think that the point about the mind and the soul, and then there's a third piece, and I forget what they refer to it as God, God, right? Is the third piece, and the chariot. It's interesting. So there has to be balance between the three. So I think that someone might come to the conclusion that mental health is an indication of the mind not being balanced with the other two, perhaps.
Perhaps. Dino has a little thing he wants to just go over with the chariot metaphor. But, I think something to think about, too, with these teachings is essentially the world is divided into the material world, which is that what we experience and we can touch and see and smell through our senses, and the spiritual world, which is transcendent to our senses. This philosophy teaches that we are embodied spirits, and we're experiencing the world that, this is real. What is coming in through our faculties is real, but it's how we're engaging with the world through our senses. So the more we can find that center point, and like the metaphor of the chariot, the body is a chariot, and it's in the handouts. I can also put it in the Zoom.
It'll be on the second to last page.
Yeah.
If you have the staple, or it will be at the end of the back folder if you have a folder. That folder.
So the idea is your soul is in this vehicle of a body, but there's a higher part of you, this Paramatma, or that we can connect our intelligence to and give the reins of our chariot to that higher intelligence. So as far as mental health, this is really, it's not my expertise at all. And any of the Zoomers that might be able to speak on this, Cameron, I don't know if you're there, but for all of us, yoga is for our mental health. It comes down to, these teachings are, the Yoga Sutras, which Acharya Dev spoke about so beautifully. The Yoga Sutras say in the second verse that yoga is to calm the mental modifications, the ripples of the mind, so we can see our true nature. And how we do that is through detachment of the senses. So like handing the reins of our horses over to our higher mind. And, if someone is afflicted, and we can all relate. We can probably have people really close in our sphere, and it might be you. I have my own mental modifications that I'm dealing with on a daily basis. Through the practice of yoga, it's helped calm my mind because I can redirect through the practices.
Any conflicts, like conflicts between families.
Yeah.
Conflicts, sort of like what's going on in chapter 1. It's a perfect segue.
Thank
to
you.
talking about
Yeah.
that, right?
So, I think that's a really big question, and it's worth bringing to to our elder teachers. Cameron, did you hear that, what Chad was asking about mental health? Do you have any feedback?
I'm not exactly an expert on such a big question, but I mean, it comes to the point of the three gunas, when you start associating, so you got the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. So, when we choose to associate with one over the other, and in this case, it's very likely the mode of ignorance, and that can come in numerous ways, between, media we take in or behaviors we have, such as staying up late or not getting enough sleep. All these things compounding will kind of, build our mental states, for better or for worse. So when we choose to associate with one of the three modes over the other, then you may see, mental illness start to manifest.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The short answer.
So we'll approach the gunas. These are the modes of material nature in chapter 2. Krishna will speak on it. Guna literally means rope. So we can be bound through these influences. It's all material nature that are influencing how we engage in the world, depending on the time of day. Like Cameron said, on what we eat, what we consume. And so to detach from these three gunas, the modes of material nature, is part of the work. And this is high-minded stuff, and you guys are getting hit with a lot. And I guess let's just briefly, I'll do the quick Gita overview. It takes place on a battlefield. The main character is a warrior. His name is Arjuna. He's having a conversation with his chariot driver, who is Lord Krishna. And last week, toward the end of class, someone asked about, why is Krishna driving the chariot? So, there's a bunch of different reasons, but it was a choice, actually. Arjuna is going into battle against his family. So Arjuna is one of 5 brothers, and they're the good guys. The opposing army is constituted of his cousins, and there are 100 of them. And they're led by the evil-minded Duryodhana. And so those of you who read or have read it in the past, no doubt have come across all of these names, and you're like, I don't even know how to say this word. So just for the sake of getting through the book, we're gonna, most of the conversation, most of the people being named, it's gonna be either Krishna or Arjuna, except in chapter 1. So on the battlefield, right away, Arjuna is like, I don't wanna fight. And Krishna puts him into this position, this awkward position. It said, so the song of God, which is what Bhagavad Gita translates to, so the song of God can be sung. And so the conversation ensues. Over the course of the dialogue, Krishna establishes that we live in a material world, but we're spiritual beings. In order to truly experience full life, we want to identify more with our spiritual selves. There's going to be ups and downs. This is the material world. Everything's changing all the time, including our bodies. Like Acharya Dev last week gave this beautiful example of how our skin cells, if I hugged you 2 weeks ago and I hug you today, you're hugging a different person in a way, because our skin is changing. So we live in a material world. We're spiritual beings. Our bodies are not permanent. Our thoughts are not permanent. In fact, we're not our bodies and we're not our thoughts. We're not our mind. What we are is we sell ourselves short, and there's this hilarious sentence in here. I won't be able to find it, but here, that when we live under the lash of our senses, we live in abject slavery, in a tiny prison of our mind, because our mind is pulling us like those horses.
I want to eat, I want to sleep, I want to make
Yeah.
So you want
That
to
sounds
be-
great.
I know, right?
Eat, sleep, mate, defend. Let's go. Let's go. So,
Cameron has a comment.
yes, please. Cameron.
I can read that.
Oh,
It
okay.
says, I think it is also important to consider that your conditioning may have happened from a previous life. Our predispositions for mental states may not be caused by choices we can remember or account for in this lifetime. Also, things outside of our control, such as an environment in our formative years. So it's addressing the mental health.
So would that be karma, dharma?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, simply put, karma. In chapter 3 or 4, Krishna says that the intricacies of karma are intricate.
And we'll, that's great.
So
We'll
you
get to
can't,
that.
like, karma's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Karma literally means action. So we create reaction to our action with everything we do. From the second our eyes open, we're engaging. That's action. There is no inaction, it says in chapter 2. So you're either acting in self-will or you're directing your activities to the higher self, ultimately, which is Krishna. So this is bhakti yoga. And like Acharya Dev talked last week, yoga is about connecting. It translates to a variety of different things, but think of it as being connected. And someone who practices this yoga bhakti is a bhakta. Bhakti means unswerving love and devotion to source. So when we practice bhakti yoga, we're integrating our activities in a devotional way. So back to the narrative. Over the course of 18 chapters, these are 18 chapters in a much, much, much larger work. Krishna and Arjuna talk. And Arjuna is driving the narrative because he keeps asking these great questions. So in chapter 1, who read chapter 1? Okay, cool. And Zoomers? So did you guys see Sammy's one hand? So in chapter 1 opens up on the battlefield. And it is narrated by the assistant to the blind king Dhritarashtra. He's the father of the 100 bad guys. And he asks his helper, whose name is Sanjay, he says, first verse, he's like, Sanjaya, what's going on the battlefield? What's going on with my sons? And then the Arjuna and his brothers.
His sons are the bad sons.
Well,
Bad.
Dhritarashtra's sons are the bad ones. And he's like, what's going on with my sons, the bad ones? He doesn't think they're bad, though. He thinks that they're entitled. And then those 5 other sons, Arjuna and his brothers, who are preparing to fight. So Sanjaya has the gift of sight in his heart, and he tells the king, okay, well, there's your son, Duryodhana, who is the chief. He's the chief bad guy. And he's strutting around, talking about his prowess, basically. And with him is their grandfather, who is the grandfather to all of them, the good guys and the bad guys. And then their military arts teacher, their martial arts teacher. So when Arjuna, who's ready to fight, they're all like, you gotta imagine this battle scene. The horses and elephants and sounds and war drums and smoke from fires and, they were ready. There were decades and decades leading up to this battle. Family about to fight. And it could have been stopped in a bunch of different ways, but this evil son wasn't gonna back down. The evil son chose Krishna's army to fight. the good son, Arjuna the warrior, chose Krishna to be his chariot driver. So it's, there's a lot going on there. But so here it is, scene opens up. Krishna asks his chariot driver to take him out into the middle so he can survey what's going on. Who am I about to fight? I mean, I know who I'm about to fight, but I just want to take it in. So Krishna drives the chariot, beautiful chariot. On the flag on top of the chariot is Hanuman. And he's a symbol of devotion as well. And parks the chariot right in front of his grandfather, their military arts teacher, and the evil-minded leader. Here you go, Arjuna. Here's who you're about to fight. Those are the only words he says in the first chapter. Krishna says, behold. So Arjuna is standing there in the middle, and some copies of Bhagavad Gita on the inside will have this painting of this chariot amongst the assembled armies. And there's like millions, right? Millions of people assembled. So good time to talk about the metaphor of the chariot. You want to drop in on this one, Dino?
Yeah, that symbol, that metaphor, the picture of it.
Everybody has a copy of that.
Yeah, to me it really connected.
Why don't you actually talk about a little bit about like family?
Yeah, I mean, this all dropped when I've been going through a very, a hard time with family and making decisions that were put off for a while. And so it kind of really resonated with me, understanding going into a battlefield, which I ended up doing with family. And I think, going into pulling the chariot into the middle of both sides, to me, it kind of resembles, just pausing to absorb all that information, to really understand what both sides are, right? And for me, in my personal life, that took, a lot of time and a lot of pain and a lot of doubt about, and I had been in this kind of cycle for several years of inaction because I knew what the right action was and I didn't want to take it. When I finally took a step into it, it blew up like I thought it would, and I ended up really at war with a family member. And it's required me to seek a higher power, to make sure that, I am using my intelligence and I'm not acting out of my senses, out of passion or rage, to really try to absorb it, and witness it as it's happening to me. So for me, the chariot in that metaphor, as, Krishna is the driver, and what I hear in these studies is, Krishna's not going to do it for us, right? He's going to give us all the information. If we lean into his teachings, he's going to give us the intelligence to make the right decision, right? And for me, that resonates because, it is us. It is you that makes those, in the physical world, takes those steps. But if you're using your intelligence through the Krishna teaching, then you'll make that righteous choice. So the metaphor of Krishna holding on to the reins, and the reins being your mind, and the horses being your senses, and that's where the battle for decision really happens in my daily life, right? Is being pulled back into the center, into the middle of my chariot, where my soul is, because in that metaphor, the chariot is your body. Arjuna is all of us, is our soul, and Krishna, our higher power, is the intelligence that has the reins of your mind, and will make those, and will let you make those decisions if you're listening to it right, and understand how to receive that information coming from your senses, because we're always getting pulled in outwards into our senses. I know at least I am. And I like that example of that gyroscope, and the center, where our heart and our wisdom is really the center of any gyroscope. And as we're being pulled out into the outer realm of a gyroscope, it's chaotic, right? It's disorienting, right? But if you look at any gyroscope and in the core of it, right, it's steadfast, it's centered, right? And so I think of that picture pulling back from those reins into our center and not being pulled by the senses. You know, was that a good?
Yeah. Can
answer to
anyone
that
else?
question? Okay. And I feel that. I live it daily.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
Moment by moment.
Does anyone else have, can you relate, like who relates to and how this idea of facing something really hard, possibly with family? It was just Thanksgiving. You know, maybe you had an actual thing. And, you know, if, in a couple words, or if anyone wants to share anything. And,
I mean, I can share.
yeah, please, Aaron.
I mean, so I always get a lot of comfort out of the first chapter of the Gita because,
Yeah.
you know, like Arjuna was no regular warrior even. I mean, he has a bow that can like destroy an entire army. He's like been gifted like a weapon where he can like with his eyes destroy things. I mean, he is like a real warrior.
He's the
And
real
he
deal.
is like caught in all this doubt about what to do next, and you know, so like in our own lives, to have doubt and fear, you know, and like how, you know, the opposite of fear, of course, is courage, and to like have these doubts, and of course when they, you know, I always think of the first chapter how a lot of it has to do with family, and like that's an area where in the material world we can really get like, you know, because later the Gita basically explains, I mean, those are just eternal souls in a body, but you know, of course, we see those like relationships as really intensely, closely knit to us.
Yeah.
When you know it's really just an eternal soul like ourselves. So I just always get a lot of comfort. I'm like, well, like when I do have doubt, I'll be like, okay, what steps can I take to like lean into the courage to like face this battle, whether it's, you know, what I'm choosing to watch on TV, or you know, bigger life decisions, or how I treat my children, you know, and I can like lean into the courage side of it, but like not beat myself up for the doubt, because I'm like, well, I mean, Arjuna had doubt, and he was like super warrior. So
Beautiful point, Aaron. Points. Yeah. Anyone else? Darcy?
Yeah, I just came from a dinner with somebody who I'd had some conflict with, who's very, care a lot about. Even like the conflict was 5 years ago, and sat down to dinner with this person, and by the end of dinner, he's bringing up this argument that like came between us 5 years ago. And my horses, my horses wanted to bolt. No, but you know, it just kind of reminds me of like for myself, like needing to find a calm place to settle my horses, to take a deep breath, to calmly, basically see his side, explain my side, and then just pause. I mean, like, and that's kind of what I did. And but yeah, my horses are still upset. It's gonna take a little meditation to like get to that place where, where I get past the feelings, where I get kind of closer to my core and really know how to respond or not respond at all, So I just found that analogy to just be very just close to what I just experienced just an hour ago.
Hours ago.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's just so many little things throughout the day that do get things jazzed up and
Isn't that
reactionary. Yeah.
Well, and this narrative is 5,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So this is having an experience like you just described, like Aaron just described, like Dino just described, is timeless and it's material. It's based in the material world. But it doesn't mean that we don't have feelings, Like we feel your feelings, like that's real, that's happening. Acknowledge, like be with them, process them, but we don't like ride them out with our claws dug in, Okay.
I was just gonna
yeah,
say,
please, Aaron.
Kind of for the gentleman's question about the mental health. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it kind of makes me think of the, and then you lean back into those tools that, yoga gives you, and you know, they are found in other faiths as well, but like
Of course.
meditation, you know, studying this sacred text, you know, in this lineage, you know, doing the asanas, kirtan, you do those things, and, you know, your feelings of, which I view as the 100 cousins, you know, your feelings of anger and fear, like those things dissipate, and you can lean into the, you know, other side, which is courage and love. So anyway, that's my share.
Boom. Yeah, there's infinite potentially
An analogy
bad
that really helps
cousins.
me when I'm going into that, my anger horse.
Anger
I
horse.
heard this. I can't remember where I heard of it. It was recently. That, and I can't remember verbatim, but I think you'll all get the gist of this. Anger is something that we take out on ourselves because of something somebody else did. Think about that.
Yeah.
How awful we feel when we're angry. And that person or whatever that is that you're angry about doesn't feel that. Only we feel that. You know, and that's really been a deep connection to me. It's like, oh, that's why you know, you've got to stay centered. You got to come back into here, because out there is where anger lives, right? And we're being pulled out there. That's when we're going to feel like that the most. When we can retreat from that, which is away from the material world
Like
into
detached,
ourselves, I think
yeah.
that's where
One
I
of my
find
favorite
peace.
quotes is,
Emily?
1 minute of being angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness.
Ooh, technical. Zoomers, anyone have anything they would like to? Okay,
I'll say something, Leslie. That's okay.
please, Tracy, I'm gonna mute.
Okay. So I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I think I remember hearing that when they had the choice of if it was going to be Krishna or his army, Krishna was saying, I won't even fight. You can have my army or you can have me and I won't fight. So that might be another reason, the significance of the chariot driver. But also, I think it's interesting to think that Krishna can just be there with us in our hearts, but he's not going to do the work for us. So that's all I had to say.
I hope it's not nauseating with me flipping the camera around. In chapter 9, verse 9, Krishna says he's seated as though neutral. So that's also something to think about. Like, there's a war, there's, you know, light and dark, good and bad. There's all kinds of, you know, and the people on the bad side think that their cause is just like, you know, the people, you know, it's classic. So our higher power is neutral. And at the end of Bhagavad Gita, he tells Arjuna, now you've heard my story, you've heard all of these teachings, do as you wish. So even with all the teachings, he still says, you have free will, dude. And that's where, you know, we get to exercise this in our lives. At dinner, you know, everywhere else, in the courtroom, in the gym, on the streets. Dana and I were talking about this earlier, like, you know, the person in front of you in traffic, why aren't you going faster? Or why do you have that stupid bumper sticker? You know, and like, you know, if I can just, I feel so much better if I'm not attaching onto what's going on around me, and then of course remembering that I'm also part of the traffic. Yeah, Dana, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, what I thought was just interesting, and maybe a point you can talk more about, was that Darcy, you were saying, gets to my core, right? What does that mean? Because we all know what that means. Our core, like, what is that? And I think, you know, that's what the Bhagavad Gita is trying to help us understand is we are that. What do we mean when we say core? It's our spirituality. It's that part of us that doesn't die, that we just know that feeling I'm not going to pass away. So I don't know if that's something that we can talk about, that duality of we have this beautiful soul in this material world that is really hard on us, you know? It's not easy to be here, and we're in conflict with that, and that's what Arjuna is dealing with. And so this wisdom is intended to say, here's a path on how to try to navigate this world as kindly as you can, while being the spirit soul in a material body, in a material world that is not empathetic many times to that situation. So, I don't know, I think...
Nicely said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of gets us into chapter 2. Hold on, I see something in the group chat. Grace says Duryodhana also arranged it so he would get the first pick of either Krishna or his army, like it was dirty from the get. Yeah. So in the larger work called the Mahabharata that the Bhagavad Gita comes from, there are stories and stories and stories and stories about the events between these brothers and the cousins leading up to the war. And the kind of the big thing, this is after being exiled, getting kicked out of your own kingdom, not even given like enough land you could, put in a thimble, or I don't remember the exact language, but the 5 brothers, the good guys, had to like wander around in disguise. And there's some really amusing stories. I see there's something in the chat maybe. But on the brink of the war, Duryodhana, the evil-minded brother, and Arjuna approached Krishna, who was sleeping. He was like crashed, because he's a person. He was just taking a nap. He needed a break. And when he opened his eyes, he saw Duryodhana first. And so of the two, he gave Duryodhana the first audience. He said, Duryodhana, what do you want? Do you want me, or do you want my army? And Duryodhana's like, I want your army. Because
Arjuna was just left with the other choice.
But he wanted, but Krishna was his best friend.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, Chad.
But if I'm going to fight a war, I probably want to know.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a logical thought, but...
Well, and you could say it's a metaphorical choice of surrender.
Sure.
And that's what's happening at the end of, he saw Arjuna first. Cameron said, really? Oh, dang.
He saw, so Duryodhana went to see Krishna, but Krishna was sleeping. So Duryodhana said, I'm going to sit by his head. So when he wakes up, he's going to see me first. I'll be sat right by his head. And then Arjuna came in after and sat by Krishna's feet. And as soon as Krishna woke up, he sat up, and he was obviously facing towards his feet, and he saw Arjuna first. And then basically Duryodhana just kind of whined his way until Krishna said, all right, fine, you can have first pick since you're older. And you say you were here first.
It's pretty, I mean, and you can see that happening, right? Like even, in anyone's experience where they've been in head-to-head with a family member, like, what kind of shenanigans go down. So thank you for that, Cameron. Okay, so at the end of chapter 1, does anyone remember, like, Arjuna, it's called Arjuna's Lament. And he's like, if I fight them, it's not even going to be worth it. It's not going to be worth the best kingdom in all of the worlds, or even in the heavens. If I fight them, there's going to be blood. I'd rather just bail. Because if I fight, society's going to crumble. I mean, he goes that far. Because in a big war like this, there are millions of people about to battle. A lot of people are going to die. So that's going to leave people, women, having to fend for themselves to protect their children. So it's just, he talks about the whole fabric of society crumbling. At the very end of chapter 1, he slumps to the floor of the chariot, and he says he's not going to fight. He drops his bow, the bow that Aaron was talking about. It's called Gandiva. And so when we open chapter 2 is considered...
Did anybody remember what was said at the end of chapter 1? What was said?
Say that again?
You asked what was said at the end of chapter 1?
Well, just if people remember that Arjuna's like giving all these great reasons why he shouldn't fight.
That's
Yeah.
his lament.
Yes,
Okay,
Arjuna's
I
lament.
just-
Yeah.
Thank you all, absolutely.
Yeah.
This straight in my head. Thank you, go ahead.
So at the beginning of chapter 1, Krishna's like kind of ribbing him a little bit. And he says, Arjuna, come on. You're a warrior. You're lamenting for that which is not worthy of lament. So this is kind of a big thing. This sets up Krishna's argument that you're lamenting these personalities that actually have pretty much done you wrong your whole life. They tried to burn you down in your house. They exiled you. They tried to rape your wife in front of everybody. Like, there's a million things that Krishna could be calling out, but he actually says, you know, that so it's the beginning of chapter 2. Hold on. That, you know, these are embodied souls, and they're this is a temporary body. You're mourning a temporary situation, and if you can recognize that, he says in chapter 2, verse 14, that, you know, if you can tolerate the dualities of hot and cold, summer, winter, if you can just tolerate, you're gonna be a little better. If you can just tolerate this. He kind of even, right before this, he smiles. Because Arjuna, at verse 7, 8, somewhere around that, Arjuna tells him again that decisively, I'm not gonna fight, but to tell, Arjuna surrenders and says, tell me what's best for me, you know better. And that's when the teachings begin, and chapter 2 is often called the contents of the Gita summarized. So, dualities. Who can define the word duality?
How about duo? Anything similar to duo? Two.
Yeah. So simply, it's a contrast of two things. And you'll see throughout the Bhagavad Gita that we have contrasts like heat and cold, happiness and distress, summer and winter, light and dark, night and day, victory and defeat, fame and infamy, pleasure and pain. So the material world is where you find all of this. We are by nature, you guys, the spirit soul, our Atma, is by nature Sat, Chit, Ananda. Is there anyone that has heard this term before? Zoomers, Sat, Chit, Ananda? Yeah, it means eternal. So Krishna addresses that our souls are eternal, so they're not material. The Chit is this consciousness, this incredible knowing, connection. And Ananda means blissful. So we're blissful by nature. The material world is where we're going to experience the flickering of the dualities. So that's where, like Dino mentioned, the gyroscope. You know, the gyroscope has this steady core, the core that Darcy talked about. So if we can tolerate happiness and distress of the material world, because it's going to come and go. I'm going to experience fame. I'm going to experience infamy. I'm going to experience pleasure. I'm going to experience
So it's
pain.
kind of a call out to equanimity.
Well, that's exactly what he says. So Dino just said he's calling out equanimity.
Because it won't be pulled too far in one direction for one or too far in the other in the duality.
Yeah. Okay. So the material world, and by extension, the spiritual world there's absolute bliss there. It's eternal. So this concept of flickering is really important, and we'll hear it again and again. Also, this idea of stability, equality. HDG defines equanimity. He'll equate it with equality. Equate with equality. I don't know. Any other examples you guys can think of duality? I don't know.
So
It's
these
endless.
dualities are these things that you're describing that are pulling at our senses.
Yes. Yeah, why is that a problem?
Sound and silence.
Ooh, that's nice.
Cool one.
Yeah. Chad's a musician too, so sound and silence.
Happiness.
Sometimes the beauty is in between the notes that are played, not just the notes. And the silence between the notes.
I love that. Wow, what a nice insight. The silence between the notes. That's almost what Arjuna did by asking Krishna to pull his chariot into in between the two armies. Okay, so Dino mentioned, this is a big point, that because of the dualities, we can be pulled in all directions. And so equanimity is it's an important practice. You know, as things come and go, the waves come and go.
Movement and stillness.
Movement and stillness, that's another nice one.
But true stillness is, I think about this a lot, true stillness is really hard to achieve because atoms are always moving, right? Like on the molecular level.
Yeah.
But I think it's more about like, if you're talking about this practice, it would be more about like spiritual stillness or stillness of the mind or stillness of all the things, of the body, the mind, and the soul.
Yeah. Well, you could even say, you
Or
mentioned
movement of all three.
atoms are always moving. And like Cameron brought up the three modes of material nature, the gunas, which are always moving too. And I mentioned that the translation is as ropes. So the gunas pull us, just like our senses, and influence us. And ropes can bind, but they can also be something that can pull us up and out. So if someone throws you a rope, you're gonna, if you're drowning, you're gonna pick up the rope. So you could even say that when we start to wake up to these teachings, we can use that moment when you're sitting at dinner going, man, my horse is, like, use that moment. Like, that is a rope that you can pull onto to go to your center.
Rather than being bound by it.
Rather than being bound, yeah. So so Acharya Dave last week talked about a really important verse, and it sets up, this idea of birth and death, chapter 2, verse 13, and it goes on through 17 through 20 about being embodied. And the body will perish. We've all had pets. We have, we've seen, there's heartbreak around people that we have lost, but our souls are eternal. So this is metaphysical truth. And the,
Well, I think part of it is how then, as these spirit souls, do we deal with living in a material world?
yes.
Right? The idea that things are constantly changing. We're in a material world that is constantly changing. We remain the same. Like everyone, remember when you were a kid? That was you, right? That wasn't a different person. But are you in the same body? No. And it's kind of weird to think about, right? But when you really do think about it, it's like, okay, so then that's the whole, and the dualities are these difficult things that our spirit souls are having to encounter. And so, those are my
Yeah.
thoughts.
And when we start to attach to, like, when I was 12, I could do a badass back bend, and I can't do it anymore because my wrist bothers me. But my 12-year-old Leslie could do, we can all think of things like that we were able to do, and because of our changing bodies, and I keep hugging myself, I'm grateful for this body because it's brought me here with you guys. Okay. Dualities, we're going to be born and reborn, and the directive that Krishna brings to Arjuna at kind of around the middle of chapter 2 is about dharma.
Dharma. So this is another term that we'll encounter again and again. We'll see it defined as duty. Verse 48. Would someone find that, please, and read it?
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2, verse 48.
The verse number at the end of each sentence.
Oh, yeah, and yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Zoomers, I'll let you guys read next time. I have a couple verses that we'll pull out here.
It is verse 48 in chapter 2.
Yes.
Okay, everyone's on page 158. I am not going to read it out. Somebody else.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Verb in yoga, perform deeds without attachment. Being equal in success and failure, for yoga is said to be equality.
Dhananjaya. Okay, so that's a name for Arjuna, and it means winner of wealth. It's kind of sweet. So because they're best friends, they have all these names for each other. You know, like Dino and I have all kinds of names for each other that are really sweet and would be embarrassing to say in public. But you know, this conversation on the battlefield is happening between the two armies, so the other warriors can hear it. And so Krishna tells Arjuna, and I'm going to paraphrase, he says, perform your duty, do your duty, you're a fighter. You were trained by that guy that we're parked right in front of, Drona, your teacher, your martial arts teacher. You were trained by him to fight. Every facet of your being is a warrior. So do your duty. If you don't, you know, so without attachment, you know, there are going to be potential consequences. And such a practice is called yoga. Equanimity is yoga. So yeah, yoga, we think of cobra pose, we think of up dog, down dog, but the yoga of the Bhagavad Gita is practicing doing your duty with equipoise. Finding that center of the gyroscope.
Leads me to think about like my journey finding like what my purpose is, right? Like in this lifetime or in this body, like for this moment, this like flicker moment I exist on this earth at this time. Like what is the purpose? So like Arjuna's purpose was to be a warrior and fight this war. So like it's an interesting journey.
And we have about 5
Yeah.
minutes left, so maybe
Oh,
we
yeah.
can just talk about that idea of material, you know, that duality.
Yeah, I want to get to the two verses
Got it.
toward the end. Real quick, Dharma also translates to essential purpose. So doing your Dharma is living your essential purpose. Briefly, the Vedic system was, there were 4 vocations. Warrior is one of them. So there's the worker, the merchant, the warrior, protector type, even administrator, and even medical people were kind of lumped in there. And then the priestly class, it's called the Varnashram system, and we can talk about it another time. But does any Zoomer, do you have any comments about do your duty and Dharma?
Yeah, I think the important thing is to not, I think it's one of the biggest things when it comes back to this idea of dualities is not being attached to the fruits of your action. It says here, what is it? Hang on, I had it pulled up and now the lock screen is fighting me. Come on. Oh, it says right here, 247, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So essentially, you know, when you're doing things, you can try as much as you like, but in the end, you have no control over the outcome. Whether, you know, regardless of how certain you may be, there's so many factors involved that, you know, you have to kind of let that idea go, that you're in control, because in reality, we have a very minuscule amount of control. And then two, don't never be attached to not doing your duty. It's kind of what this whole thing with Arjuna, where he's trying to renounce being his position as a warrior. It's kind of what he was fated to do by his conditioning, and he's trying to be like, oh, I'm gonna go sit out in the woods or whatever. It's the better thing to do. Better they kill me unarmed or whatever. And that's him being attached to not doing his duty. In reality, he's gonna end up being in more distress than he would if he would just fight, because he's got the mind of a warrior. What's he gonna do when he's sitting out the woods? He's gonna be thinking about the war the whole time. So better he just go and do what he's supposed to do, because that's what he has the mind for. And I think that kind of comes back to this question now about finding your purpose. I don't necessarily think that dharma is like purpose in the sense that we usually think about it, like we have some grand achievement to make or contribute, but more of what are we conditioned to do naturally, so we can keep a steady mind. Because when we start acting outside of the way we were predisposed for, we enter a state of stress, and that's not beneficial to us or our goals.
Grace says she's still trying to find her dharma. Well, and who can relate to that, and how? Did anyone have any comment about that? Hans, you're nodding and smiling.
I relate.
We all just giggled. Okay. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Hans.
I just think it's important that, like, I think as when we're young and we're being guided towards something because, maybe you're gifted at something, but for example, I'm an artist. And I always thought that was what I was really meant to do. And then I found teaching, and I work, I'm a 3rd grade teacher. And then it filled me up in a way that art does fill me. I mean, but not in this same manner. And, feel like every day I'm doing, it feels balanced. It can be the worst day with the kids, and I still walk away and think, I did my job today. Not my job, but not my money earning job, but my inner job. I did my job today. And I think that can be really confusing as, going through life, when we have other things that also bring us joy and bring other people joy. To kind of identify, for me, what I really am supposed to be doing. I can feel it. I can feel it when I'm there. I don't know if I'm explaining it right.
No, you did. That's great. Anyone else? Thank you. That's beautiful. Kelly, yeah.
I guess, speaking of attachments, so I've been reading a different book that just really swirls the thoughts in my head, so I'm sorry if this isn't the most eloquently stated, but it's been interesting because it talks about, so we're talking about attachments and dualities and just all these things that we're experiencing that aren't us, but things that we're experiencing that are contributing to what we're perceiving as us. And I've been just struggling to really detach the idea of my inner self, my core, truly and there was one part of the book and it was talking about even the idea of time, and I was just what? I was just really struggling with it, but then it was mentioning it's sort of that feeling when you feel just completely aware. So maybe it's in yoga at the end of class, but there's just a moment where you're just experiencing, and gosh, and I'm not even gonna, I don't know, that maybe I'll study some more before next week to be able to say this better. But it was just really interesting because I've been going to a lot of practices and doing a lot of practices recently and trying to when I am in that just sense of awareness, what does else exist? And it is time isn't a thing in that sense. There isn't, I don't know, it's to practice it in that way and to watch and feel all those dualities just completely slip away has been just like really wonderful. So I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
my brain has just been exploding these last couple. Like after we talked for like 2 hours after last class, and I feel like I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. But yeah. So I've just been really thinking about the idea of attachments and can I truly just let those be a separate part than like what's me?
Sure, it's hard to do. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, they're attached. So
Yeah.
it's called that for a reason.
They're attached.
Yeah.
I mean, there's beautiful things out there, and there's delicious things out there, and you name it. There's icky things that you want to attach to. So to experience it, that's transcendence, and it's possible. It's possible in this body. So it is officially time. If you guys are okay with going a few minutes over, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if anybody needs to leave, they can.
Yeah. Please.
Yeah, they leave.
Stop and stare. So later in after this verse 47, verse 48 that we just talked about, Krishna starts to talk about detachment and why it's important, and he uses this beautiful metaphor of pulling in your senses like a tortoise pulls in its limbs. I love it. The tortoise, though, is still a tortoise. Like, I'm still Leslie when I pull my limbs in. You know what I mean? So I'm still who I am, even though I'm not attaching. But the key, he says in verse 59, and is there a Zoomer out there that can read verse 59 for us? And you can, if you have the Prabhupada version, that's fine too.
Sometimes you all may hear different words.
Yeah.
There are other translations, but
I'm pretty sure Sammy is in like a giant yin pose right now, so I won't make her get up. Hey, Cameron.
I'll read for you. It says, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste is fixed. He is fixed in consciousness.
Okay, so higher taste. When we pull our senses back, this verse is saying like the taste still remains. Like I still want the pie, but I'm not going to eat the pie. I'm going to still want the pie. What do I do about it? And I start thinking about the pie. And then, because I don't have a higher thing to take my mind to. We talked earlier about like quitting smoking. It's been a long time for me, but I used to smoke. And like, if I didn't have something to take my consciousness to, all I would want to do is think about smoking. So we give ourselves a higher taste, and here, ultimately that's connecting with your divine, with your.
So connecting with our divine, is that really the purpose that we're all here for then?
What do you think?
Not so much personal identity or accomplishment, but the transcendence and disconnect from the material world, right?
Well, being in the world, though.
But we're in the world,
Yeah.
but not of the world.
Exactly.
Right? So we all really have the same purpose, right? And that's to transcend, right? I mean, I struggle with that too. I've worked most of my life doing one thing, and I find identity there, but not lately. Not lately. Over half my life doing one thing, and now I truly understand it. It's not my identity.
Yeah.
It's not. It's for whatever reason, it's the work that I've been given to do, right? And to detach from the results is hard to do, right?
mm-hmm.
But if it's meant to be, then it will be. I just need to identify and do the work.
would you share with the group what a higher taste is for you?
What a higher taste
Yeah,
is for me.
what you found to be something that elevates you through this?
When I can detach from the results,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I have a peace and a calmness, and that's the taste I'm going for right now. Is some peace and
Taste,
calmness
calm.
in my life.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, when I feel like I'm detaching from the results, but I know I'm doing the work, I get a very peaceful feeling, and that's what I'm tasting after. That's
Yeah.
I can imagine that's really challenging when you have like a number of other souls whom are dependent upon
it's heavy.
the fruits of your labor,
Yes.
or like whatever choices you make, you know. So that's an added stressor that, you know, I don't have because I'm not a business owner, so like.
I've
I
got
can't
50
imagine.
people.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, and they're like all part of that material world as well, like dependent upon this establishment or this thing that you've created to bear fruit for them as well. So detaching from that could be hard too.
This applies to my life in so many different
Right, yeah,
dealing with 50 other sentient beings, you know, and having to, you know, take steps towards, you know, my work that is also trying to bring them along with me
Yeah.
in this material world, but still detaching myself from the results. I mean, there's definitely a balance there for sure.
Yeah.
Equanimity.
Yeah. I just have one more set of verses that I want us to talk about, and let's have someone in the room find verses 62 and 63. 262, 263.
When a person contemplates sense objects, attachment for them arises. I was just reading this actually.
Wow.
Desire springs from attachment, and from desire anger is born. From anger comes confusion. From confusion, memory loss. From memory loss, reason's truth. By reason's ruin, self vanishes. So that kind of ties into that like mental health piece that I was talking about.
Wow.
I mean, if I can bring it full circle for
Totally.
for the room. So like a lot of people that I encounter that are very acutely mentally ill do have a lot of anger and confusion and memory loss. Like those are very real things that occur for them. I do also experience those feelings in my life as well. So that's kind of touching on what I was talking about. I mean, it's not some big long proclamation about what it is, but
Isn't that interesting that you got to read those two verses?
yeah, I was yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone in the room? Like, how does this verse speak to you? You know, if I was talking to Dana about this earlier. Like, you know, Black Friday. You get the email.
That's a good example.
You get the like. There's this lust for the thing that you didn't even know that you needed, and then you're like, oh my god, I need to go to REI right now. Or, I mean, except they were closed. I know, but so who has examples? Like, what's an example from
Go to REI right now.
right now? So when you're thinking about something and you want it, maybe you can't even get it, and you get pissed. And then what happens? You like, it blows your life up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go for it.
For me, it kind of desire to be in another moment than what we're in causes that anger in me personally, and I never really thought of it as desire before, but just like sometimes when you're like upset about something, and then you're like, oh, it's because I don't want to be here, right? Not in this example, but whatever that situation is. And so it doesn't have to be like a material thing, but just if you're not in the present moment, you don't want to be in that present moment, for me can cause anger like that. And I never thought of it in that way before, so it's kind of interesting to see it that way.
Yeah. Do you have an experience where you sat with it and like were in equanimity, like Krishna suggests?
I'll think about it.
Yeah. I know that's a big one. Yeah, Aaron, you had something.
Yeah, I was gonna say how, you know, a couple of things on this chapter, like when I think about a little bit backtracking when he comes, you know, and basically Christian's like, listen, all those people are already dead, you know, like it doesn't matter. I mean, they're gonna die. Those bodies are gonna die. You're focusing on the wrong thing. And I think about how, like, I'll think, because I get caught up in the things I got to do, and I'll be like, you know, how like in 100 years, all of everybody on this earth's body will be gone. You know, like it would depend on. It's just kind of how it is. But I was thinking about even tonight, you know, like we were walking here, and you know, we have our own business, and we're kind of getting caught up in some details, and it was getting a little bit like intense, you know, because like that's how that is, right? That stuff. And then you know, I think about like what my real duty is to just be. Those are like just details. And when I get connected to the higher taste, which is like, you know, bringing in this knowledge from the Gita or thinking about God, I can get back to like, okay, my real duty is to be like, right now is to be a householder, like take care of my family, you know, like I don't need to be really that worried about all these little details that is causing anger or heated discussion. I can just like take it down a notch and be like, you know, I'm just gonna go about my duty, and the results will kind of take care of themselves. So.
Thank you.
Wow. Another real example, like for, you know, on the walk over here. Yeah. Zoomers. Any Zoomers have anything they want to say about 262 and 263? Oh my God.
It's okay.
Laptop down.
I believe you.
Just in case in the middle, it's fine.
So Brittany had to go. It is 6:45 our time. A couple of you guys are in a different time zone completely. So, okay, we've covered a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's a good conversation.
Yeah.
Things to think about, and then like go home and maybe journal or write it out or think
Yeah.
about like process.
That big picture of
That's a really good
Ideas that
point.
people have presented, and we haven't been able to dive too deeply into each one of those, but maybe that's about a self journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So Chad just said, you know, this is stuff to think about and maybe journal about. And we can have knowledge, but if it isn't applied, then it's not wisdom. So it becomes wisdom when it's applied to our lives. And, you know, I have my head full of all kinds of stuff, all kinds of information. But, you know, until I can apply it, it's just trivia. Any last minute thoughts from Zoom? Some prayer hands. Any last minute? Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Oh no, I don't know who was talking about this earlier about whoever's working in the mental health area about these. I mean, when I think of this, I think of when do I get most frustrated is when people don't do what I think they're gonna do or I think they should do. Like I have expectations for other people, and I'm sitting there like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna tell this guy this, and then he's gonna say that, and then it's all gonna be awesome. And then he doesn't do that. It's the most frustrating thing ever, especially in work. Or whatever, like, oh yeah, like this guy, me and him are totally on the same page, and it just never goes that way, and that's when things get incredibly frustrating. But then the other thing that crossed my mind when whoever's in that big room full of people said about this, like what desire in people is not being fulfilled that's causing their anger, their frustration. Like it's so prevalent in society now. What need does somebody have that's not being fulfilled, or desire that's like almost innate, that, you know, is causing that almost unwillingly on their part, you know? I mean, I think it's just a lack of love and care, but, you know, anyways.
Everyone in the room is going, yeah. Yeah. Nikki, where'd Nikki go? Oh, She's not where she was earlier. Okay, I'm gonna say bye to Zoomers, and my friend here, who also teaches at the studio, has something she wants to tell us all. So, thank you guys all for being here.